Hey guys, and welcome back. I'm Nnamz, and this is my review for Hotline Miami 2 on PS4 and PS Vita. Like with all my normal reviews, the graphics, the sound, and the gameplay will all be separately scored, and then an overall score, which is not an average, will be given at the end of the review, which reflects my overall opinion of the game. It may seem a little strange in passing to see a graphical breakdown of a retro-looking game, but Hotline Miami 2's deliberate 8-bit look combined with a flawless 60 frames per second on both PS4 and PS Vita make for a beautiful and smooth game. Now for those of you who have seen my review of the first game, this may sound like a little bit of a repetition. Indeed, a passing glance at both titles may lead you to believe that they are more or less identical looking, or that this is a mere expansion of the first game with the same graphics. However, anyone who has spent a decent amount of time with both titles will know the extra amount of polish that has went into Hotline Miami 2 over the previous game. The first thing that stands out are the extra animations. Character sprites actually move around and change stances and are much more fluid and less jerky than in the first game. Environments also have more destructibility to them. There are more glass panels to shoot out, which send cool looking glass and shrapnel flying everywhere. As mentioned before, Hotline Miami 2 runs at a flawless 60 frames per second, and this is true whether you're playing on PS4 or PS Vita. The game is absolutely identical looking on either system. In fact, if you have the OLED Vita like I do, I'd actually give the visual edge to the Vita version due to the awesome contrast that screen gives out and how it makes the colors really pop. Hotline Miami 2 is a damn pretty game and runs flawlessly. The graphics get a 9 on 10. Hotline Miami 1 had what was widely regarded as one of the best gaming soundtracks of all time. While I had high hopes for the original soundtrack of this sequel, I knew deep down that the chances of it actually surpassing the predecessor in this regard were slim. However, after blasting the tracks from the first few levels, it was clear to me that the soundtrack of Hotline Miami 2 was actually better than the first game. Since the game takes place in the early 90s, a few years after the first, all of the tracks are 90s inspired. The synthesizer and heavy bassline oriented songs just fit perfectly with the setting and are quite awesome to listen to even when not playing. What's also amazing is how they managed to fit the mood of virtually everything you're doing in the game. Whether you're flicking through a menu, viciously murdering a bunch of henchmen, or just staring at the aftermath of your actions at the score screen, the music is just perfect and fits the game like a glove. Something else vastly improved over the original are the sound effects. There are far more weapons in this sequel than the first, and each sounds so unique from each other. There's also something so satisfying about nailing enemies with a silenced pistol and hearing the high-pitched squeeze sound of the suppressor every time you fire it. Same with the roar of a chainsaw or the clicking of a nail gun. The quality and variety of the sound effects in this title are just stellar. I can't think of any reasonable downsides to the sound of this game. Like the first, the sound and music are its strongest points. The sound of Hotline Miami 2 gets a 10 out of 10. For the people who haven't played the first game, the two games in the Hotline Miami series are 2D top-down shooters that are designed around clearing extremely difficult rooms. In most circumstances you'll die in one hit, so you will die, a lot, but of course the games are designed around it. You respawn in mere milliseconds every time you die, only now with the knowledge which can prevent you from meeting your end in the same way. Beating levels are a mix of skill, trial and error, and memorization, but the real game begins when you start going for high scores. You see, Hotline Miami 2 features a chaining system in which you can score more points if you can string together kills on enemies without a significant gap of time in between. Moving quickly through a level and mowing down enemies is key to getting higher ranked scores. However, this is virtually impossible to do without memorizing each level. In this way, Hotline Miami 2 offers a ton of replay value for people who love to chase down high scores and compete on the leaderboards. Unlike the first game, where you play as one character the entire way through the main story, Hotline Miami 2 features several characters. Also unlike the first game, each character has an ability, or abilities, which help differentiate themselves from each other. For example, Mark, the guy in the bear mask, wields two MP5 submachine guns, which can be fired in two directions at once. Tony, the guy in the tiger mask, cannot carry weapons, but can melee kill most enemies in one shot. Alex and Ash, the characters in the swan masks, and my personal favorite characters in the game, are a brother and sister duo who wield a chainsaw and firearms respectively, and can be used at the same time. It's this that really sets it apart from the first game, and really adds a dimension of strategy to the levels. As addressed before in the graphics section, the PlayStation Vita version of Hotline Miami 2 looks and performs identically to the PS4 version. I'm happy to report that it also plays just as well as the PS4 version too, if not better. You see, the PlayStation Vita's analog sticks seem perfectly designed for this game. They are the perfect amount of precise and twitchy and seem to offer the right amount of resistance for a top-down shooter. The Vita's touchscreen is used to drag the screen and peek around corners, which is emulated by the PS4's touchpad. However, you can press on enemies to lock onto them on Vita, while on PS4 you need to use a shoulder button to cycle through enemies, and most of the time it does not give you the enemy you want to lock onto. I definitely say this game plays better on Vita than on PS4, but both versions play great, and with cross-buy and cross-save, you aren't missing out on buying either version. Now, I'm normally not the type to call out other people who do reviews, but anyone who has taken a look at the review scores of Hotline Miami 2, especially in light of the high review scores of the first, should know that something is a little weird here. After the critical acclaim of the first Hotline Miami game, at the time of this review, Hotline Miami 2 is sitting on 7 range scores on PC, PS4, and PS Vita. The majority of the complaints for the lower scores complain about unfair difficulty, a change in story pacing, and an alienating rape scene at the beginning of the game. I'd like to actually address these criticisms head on, as I feel that given what Hotline Miami has always been, that these aren't really valid enough criticisms to dock massive points off the game for. First, we have the unfair difficulty criticism. Hotline Miami 2 focuses more on firearm combat than the first did, which occasionally leads you to dying from an off-screen enemy more often than the first. While this can be mildly frustrating, when this happens, at worst you are losing a minute or two of progress. Moreover, the game is designed around dying and learning, so you'll know to lure out that enemy next time. The second major criticism is the change in the storytelling. Personally, I feel that the story is presented in a much more appealing and accessible way when compared to the pretentiousness of the first game, and I really don't understand why people care so much about the story in a score-chasing game enough to dock points anyway. Finally, we have the rape scene complaint. This one is by far the most stupid for 3 reasons. First, it is not a real rape scene, as is evident by the director in the game yelling "cut" at the end of it. The characters were actors. Second, the game offers a warning for more sensitive viewers to opt out of the scene, so only people who want to see it will see it, hence rendering the complaint that it exists moot. Finally, I'd like to question the moral stance of someone who is so against witnessing an implied scene of sexual violence, even a fake one in this case, yet is fine with decapitating, disemboweling, or crushing the skulls of people and animals. Hotline Miami 2 is set in a horrible world where horrible things happen. To behave like actors acting out a scene of sexual violence is worse than the act of crushing someone's skull through their eyeballs to the point where it affects the game's score is just silly and hypocritical. Hotline Miami 2 is a fun, tight, and addictive game. The added weapon variety and unique characters add a lot to the experience, and chasing high scores is as addictive as it ever was. The gameplay for Hotline Miami 2 gets a 9 out of 10. If you loved the first game, Hotline Miami 2 is everything you want out of a sequel. With improvements to the graphics, music, and gameplay, I can't recommend this game enough. Boot it up, throw on a pair of great headphones, and get sucked in. Overall, Hotline Miami 2 gets a 9 out of 10.